Okay, now one of my favorite aspects here of the Canon R5C is that this thing may be a couple years old, but Canon is really continuing to support and update this through firmware updates that is allowing it to continue to unlock and discover cool little tricks that are buried within the body of this camera. That keeps this thing very, very relevant, and this is a very, in my opinion, just a super powerful and compact filmmaking tool. Now, today what I want to do is I want to take a look at one of these recent updates that I haven't really mentioned too much in depth lately, and that is going to be the motion vector for digital IS that they have unlocked here on the Canon R5C. Now, I will say one thing that I personally experienced with digital IS is I tend to be a little bit wary of it because you can kind of get that weird artificial wobble that, in my opinion, can really sometimes ruin shots. So I've always been a little bit wary of employing digital IS when I'm shooting. But that being said, I did want to go and take a look here and kind of get my first impressions if this motion vector for digital IS is something that is actually a useful tool here on the Canon R5C. So let's go ahead, let's jump in the computer, take a look at it, and see if this could be a tool that makes this camera even more powerful than it already is. All right, let's jump over there and take a look. Oh, hey, and do me a favor, if you find this video useful in any way, shape, or form, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It is so hard to keep a YouTube channel going these days, and your subscriptions are the only thing that keep this channel going. Okay, so here we are now in front of the computer, and what I want to do is I want to break down this footage here in Premiere just to see if it's giving us what we want, and more importantly, keep an eye out for that dreaded digital wobble. Let's see if we do it. Now, I do want to make one note about this. I did make sure I did some really rough walking tests. This is what I would consider pushing any IS system to its extreme. And I wanted to have a lot of foliage and lines in there around trees just to see if we could really push this thing as far as we could. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Now, as you can see right here, I started off here, and this is basically, I have a 16mm lens ready to go, and I just have it here as a straight up just walking talk. And I just kind of want to show this here as sort of a general rule. Now you can see here, this is it with absolutely no IS. And a 16mm lens as walking, you can see I'm going through there. This just kind of gives you a feel for what the general wobbleness of something like this would be. And you can see it here. I'm going to come back to the trees. I'm trying to include foreground elements here. And you can see obviously walking, as to be expected, would give you a fair amount of this wobble. Now, what I want to do is I want to come over here and take a look here at this motion vector for digital IS. So this is the same lens, 16mm on the Canon R5C, and you can see right here I put it on. Now, one thing I noticed right off the bat, it is smoother, and I have these side by side. I'm going to go, but I just wanted to look at this full screen. One thing that I'm really noticing right here looking at it as I come through here is I'm not getting that sort of digital wobble. And there's tons of little leaves and stuff here that could throw off something like this. At a 16mm, I feel like this gives me, honestly, a pretty good result looking at this motion vector for digital IS versus it off. And you can kind of see as I come in, I'm going to turn here and just get these kind of straight horizontal lines there. And you can see it does a pretty good job. Now, I did come here and I put them side by side, and I think this is where you really start to see, if I show these side by side, you can really now start to see how the motion of it moves. And, you know, I'm actually pretty impressed with this right off the bat. This is obviously not a gimbal, but I think when you see what this motion vector digital IS gives you versus a handheld look right off the bat, you can really see, you know, if you look at this bench here that I come by, I mean, it's not a gimbal, but I do feel it does give me a nice kind of organic flow to what this thing could be. And I just feel, you know, the one on the left, the handheld footage, I feel is kind of junky and unusable. And I feel like that motion vector digital IS actually gives me a really nice usable look. Now, that being said, 16mm is a really wide focal length. So I love to do 35mm and longer. So I want to take a look and see what the vector does when I start pushing those further focal lengths. So let's go ahead here and look at the 35 side by side. And if you look here, you can see immediately a difference between these two side by side. I mean, this is actually, it's pretty incredible to watch these two side by side as they play out. Look at me coming on the leaves. Look how much smoother that is. Once again, this is not going to be a gimbal. I don't think it's supposed to replicate a gimbal. what I think this is supposed to do is supposed to give you that handheld look, but it smooths out those micro jitters, those distracting things, still giving you that handheld vibe, but a much, much more clean thing. And what I found amazing about this is I don't really see any of those dreaded wobbles. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up on the full screen just so you can see it. And let's see if we see it. You know, I'm here now. Obviously, I'm setting up my shot, but as I start here, you know, I'm coming through leaves, I'm coming through different areas, and I don't, you know, it's obviously not perfect, but this is 35mm hand walking over uneven terrain. I'm coming through, I'm coming in, and, you know, this doesn't really strike me as crazy. I would say this is totally usable, in my opinion, as a workable shot. And I think that's exactly what you want to get from an IS in a camera. You don't need it to be a gimbal, but you need it to be salvageable. And most importantly, you don't want it to ruin the shot. And I think both at the 16 and 35mm, we have that. Now, I did also do this even more extreme, and I decided to do this at a 50mm look here as well. And I think here, if you look at the 50, you can once again start to see it. Now, this should really be testing what we have. I don't think I would really honestly do a 50mm walk like this. I'm just doing this just to see. And as you can see, foreground, background, I think this does a great job of avoiding that wobble that you're so worried about. And, you know, even when I come and get this bench here, you know, you can see the IS is completely unusable, but I still feel like the 50, I could possibly use this for something if I had to. Now, obviously it's not ideal, but I do feel it's a salvageable shot. Now, I do want to point out one more thing about these tests that I did to kind of demonstrate this motion vector for digital IS. And that is, you know, I'm walking on uneven pavement. The leaves were all wet. You can see it's pretty rainy out there, so it's dripping on me. So I was trying to duck into the leaves. Less than an ideal situation. This is actually not where I want to see digital IS. So what I did want to do is I wanted to set up what I would consider a realistic situation where I want digital IS. And that is if I'm shooting someone in a handheld position, I'm relatively stable, maybe I have just a bit of a drift, that's where I'm going to want that IS to come in, because I don't want to get the distractions of my handheld movements, but I do want to have a longer lens, like say a 50mm lens on. So let's go ahead and take a look at how it works for that. Okay, and so here you got right here, I've got two shots of my daughter watching TV. The one on the left is going to be handheld. The one on the right is going to be the motion vector digital IS. And this is what I would consider a very realistic application. You're probably not going to be walking down paths with a 50mm, but I guarantee you if you're using this kind of technology, you will be shooting handheld people at 50mm to get that look. And I'm going to go ahead and play it just so you can see the difference that it makes. And as you can see, you know, I'm trying to just maintain a real shot just like I would in real life. And I just do a little bit of a movement. You see, I kind of come a little bit here to the left to kind of almost dolly around. And I just really feel that, you know, if I come back here, I'll play this back one more time. I just really feel that motion vector does a fantastic job of giving me that smoother, non-distracting handheld. You can see the IS off is a little bit jittery, but man, that motion vector does a great job. And I don't really get any of that distracting wobble that I would normally expect. I'm going to go ahead and just come in here closer now and see this. And, you know, you can see my son back down on the couch. He's got a different motion. The couch is going to be on a different focal plane. And I feel like even as I move here around her, even at this full thing, I feel like it gives me a pretty good vector. Digital IS gives me a pretty good job. And that's what I kind of think is really important to look at this. This IS really does a great job of giving you what you need in what I would consider realistic real-world situations where you'd want to use digital IS on a Canon R5C. All right, boom, so there you go. That is my first impressions here of this motion vector for digital IS here on the Canon R5C. And I gotta tell you, I haven't had a chance yet to really take this and actually go in professional settings with it, but from my in-house test, I've been really impressed with what this can do. And what I really love about it is I can take a lens here like this 50mm that doesn't have any in-body stabilization built into the lens itself, and it allows me to get some great handheld looks that isn't distracting, that looks organic, and I haven't really been able to see that much of the wobble as it exists. I'm sure that'll come up at some point, but I've been really impressed with how this thing works, even with longer lenses, at giving me a more natural looking result in IS, depending on the situation. Anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Leave any notes and comments down below, and yeah, go out there, keep on shooting, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon.